And earlier this week, Texas became the first in the country to surpass 1 million COVID-19 cases. Hotspots like El Paso, Dallas, and Lubbock are seeing their numbers in some cases going up by 80%. And tonight, our Michael Gibson takes a closer look at the situation here in the Coastal Bend as a number of area schools have now switched back to remote learning because of the virus.
It's like 60% of those that are positive are in face-to-face instruction.
Health Director Annette Rodriguez is talking about the overall percentage of school faculty throughout Nueces County who have tested positive for COVID-19 since the start of the school year. Here are the actual numbers so far.
We're also seeing more cases in the faculty population. So yesterday I had 101 faculty members that were positive over, the last few months. And out of the 101, 63 were actually practicing face-to-face instruction.
The percentage of students attending face-to-face classroom instruction and testing positive is just below 50%.
For the student population, we have 262 positive cases, as I mentioned, and 120 of those were face-to-face instruction.
The rising number of COVID-positive teachers and students in classroom settings has prompted a number of area schools to go back to virtual learning. That's happened recently in places like Robstown and Beeville. Corpus Christi ISD did shut down Allen Elementary last year and returned to virtual learning until the 16th. That after a number of staff members there tested positive for COVID-19.
Our district, our Human Resources Department, our Office of our Nursing, our Director for Nursing and our Director for Student Support for Instructional Support also work very closely with Annette at the Health Department and determining if a campus needs to close down.
Dr. Sandra Clement is the Executive Director of School Leadership for CCISD. She tells 3 News that the job of trying to determine whether or not to shut down a school's face-to-face classroom instruction is becoming more difficult as we move closer to winter.
And so looking at that, looking at even staff that, they may go out because they're sick, but then they find out it wasn't COVID because people are getting sick with colds and they've got allergies and the weather's changing. So there's a whole lot that goes into deciding that.
And Annette Rodriguez says there's another situation that they're battling when it comes to COVID-19 in the schools.
A lot of the parents are not wanting to test their children because of sports. They want to make sure that they continue to practice these sports. And so that's unfortunate because you really don't want to let kids practice sports that you think that, may have COVID-19.
Rodriguez wanted to remind parents that if they are COVID-19 positive, then their children need to remain in quarantine at home and study virtually. With our COVID-19 case count rising, the health of everyone depends on people being responsible and following those safety guidelines we've all known about and that we should be following. Michael Gibson, 3 News.